There are connections that transcend time, space, and even logic. They are bonds that, once formed, remain engraved on the soul, even when life insists on separating them. When two hearts are meant to reunite, the universe seems to conspire in a subtle yet constant way. Little signs emerge like whispers from the unconscious, symbols echoing in everyday life, indicating that something greater is in motion. In this video, we will dive deeply into the mysteries surrounding these seemingly predestined reunions. Drawing on Carl Jung's psychology, we will unveil the invisible mechanisms that link two souls even after long periods of separation. A reunion is not just a romantic event. It is, above all, a psychic process of transformation and wholeness. If you believe that true love finds its way back, comment, "What is mine will find me in its perfect time." When two people share a profound and meaningful bond, that connection isn't established merely on a physical or emotional level, but primarily in the unconscious. Carl Jung describes the collective unconscious as a reservoir of universal images and symbols that influence our choices, emotions, and experiences. Within this symbolic field, the relationships that shape our lives have archetypal roots, revealing that reunions are not mere coincidences, but expressions of inner processes seeking completion. The idea of hearts reuniting is closely tied to the journey of individuation, a central concept in Jungian psychology. This process leads us to integrate all parts of our being, light and shadow, reason and feeling, masculine and feminine. When we drift away from someone significant, we often unconsciously begin to recognize our own shadow, the projections we made, and what we still need to integrate in order to become whole. The signs from the universe that start to appear are manifestations of the self, the psychic totality, that uses symbols to guide us back toward reconnection with something essential, whether with another person or with ourselves. Jung asserted that the unconscious communicates through synchronistic events, occurrences that, despite lacking causal connection, carry profound subjective meaning. These signs are invitations to pay attention to what still pulses within us, indicating that the story is not yet over. Therefore, reuniting with someone isn't just a matter of external destiny, but of internal maturation. When the hearts are ready, when the ego and the unconscious walk together, the signs begin to appear everywhere. They are the symbolic language of the unconscious, calling us into a new cycle of awareness, healing, and reintegration. Most intense relationships do not spring from chance, but from a powerful attraction between unconscious minds. When we meet someone and feel that this person completes us, it's very likely we are projecting onto them aspects of ourselves we have not yet recognized. For Jung, projection is a natural phenomenon at the start of every deep bond. The other becomes a canvas on which we cast parts of our psyche that remain unconscious, whether admirable qualities or traits we rejected in ourselves. In love, this projection often takes on an almost mystical force. We say the other is unlike anyone else, that we've never felt anything like this. But in truth, we are seeing in our partner not only who they are, but also everything we, in some way, wish to be. We project our unlived potential, our repressed sensitivity, our stifled courage. The other becomes a symbol of what is missing within us. This creates enchantment, but also sets up an illusion, and that illusion has an expiration date. Over time, the projected image begins to crumble. The real and the symbolic clash. The beloved person can no longer sustain the role unconsciously assigned to them, and what once seemed magical can turn into frustration, conflict, and often separation. It is at this moment that many breakups occur. Yet, according to Jung, a rupture does not signify failure. It can mark the beginning of a deeper journey, the process of individuation. Individuation is the quest to become what one truly is, in essence, integrating the rejected, hidden, or undeveloped parts of the self. When we part ways with someone who once held a deep bond, we are challenged to look inward, identify what we projected, and understand why that person stirred so much within us. Often, the other merely activated inner layers that had been dormant, and the pain of separation is in fact the echo of the soul's call for growth and self-knowledge. If the relationship was interrupted before this recognition, both people tend to continue their lives feeling incomplete, as if something remains open. This happens because the projection was not properly processed, and the psychological lesson was not finalized. In such cases, a reunion can occur, not as a repetition of the past, but as the result of inner maturation. It's as if life offers a second chance, now seen with more conscious eyes and a more whole heart. However, this reunion is only possible when projection gives way to genuine presence. For Jung, truly loving someone means seeing that person as they are, not as we wish them to be. It means recognizing the other's individuality, their limits, their choices, and above all, freeing them from the expectations we use to fill our own voids. When both involved parties undergo this process, even if on separate paths, a profound inner transformation occurs that radically changes how they relate. The paradox then reveals itself. Separation, which once seemed an end, can become a true beginning. For it is during absence that each had the chance to confront themselves, reclaim the projected parts, and integrate what was once only shadow. And only after this process can a reunion happen authentically, without illusions or masks, with presence, truth, and maturity. Thus, separation, far from being a mistake, can be seen as a necessary stage in the psychic journey. The other, by reflecting what we have yet to recognize in ourselves, invites us to look inward, to grow, and to transform. And when this process is honored, hearts genuinely connected by something greater find their way back, not out of necessity, but by conscious choice. There are moments when reality seems to whisper messages. You hear a specific song that once marked a relationship, you encounter someone with the same name as the person who left their mark on your life, or you have a vivid dream about them, just when you thought you had stopped thinking about it. These seemingly mundane events carry an intense emotional and symbolic charge. To Jung, this is not mere coincidence, but a manifestation of a fundamental psychic principle: synchronicity. Synchronicity is Jung's term for simultaneous events that lack causal connection yet make complete subjective sense. Meaningful coincidences that occur precisely when the psyche is in motion, seeking reintegration, healing, or reconnection. These signs are not manufactured by the conscious mind. They emerge from the unconscious, like encrypted messages from the soul guiding the individual back to their center. In the context of romantic relationships, this becomes even more powerful. When two hearts are linked in a deep archetypal way, even after separation, the unconscious can sustain that bond on subtler planes. And when the process of individuation advances, when the individual begins to integrate parts of themselves that were once projected onto the other, the unconscious recognizes this maturation and starts sending new signs. The self, the organizing center of the psyche, acts like an invisible compass, using synchronicities as markers that indicate there is still something to be lived or understood. These signs can take many forms: unexpected encounters, recurring dreams, repeated symbols, phrases or images that resonate with a specific emotional memory. What defines these phenomena as synchronistic is not their external form, but their internal impact. You feel they hold special meaning, even if you cannot rationally explain why. This feeling is the unconscious tapping on your consciousness. Something is being called back into your awareness. It is common during this process to feel guided or pushed by something greater. It is not unusual for someone to say, "Everything was leading me there. I felt I had to see that person again." This impulse does not come from rational will, but from the ongoing unconscious integration. When a relationship was significant and the separation still carries psychic residues, the unconscious will not rest until the lesson contained there is assimilated, and often that implies a reunion. It's important to note that these signs are not guarantees of a physical reconnection. Sometimes the reunion happens internally, through acceptance, forgiveness, or integration of what the other represented. But in many cases, when both individuals have walked the path of individuation, the universe creates the ways, unexpected, gentle, and symbolic, for the two to meet again. And when that happens, there is an almost mystical sense that it was meant to be. This perception is not fantasy. Jung saw the unconscious as a living, autonomous reality, deeply connected to the universe through archetypal patterns. When two souls touch each other on such profound levels, physical separation does not break the psychic bond. And if there is openness and maturity, the unconscious starts sending signals aimed at restoring what was interrupted, now under a new, more conscious, more whole perspective. A reunion guided by synchronicities is not a replay of the past, but an opportunity to live the bond at another level of consciousness. The signs do not appear so you can relive what's already been, but so you can understand what still can be. They reveal that something essential is in motion, that a new possibility of integration exists, not only with the other person, but primarily with the part of you that person represents. Therefore, when the signs start to appear, listen. Observe without anxiety. The psychic universe is trying to speak to you, and every symbol, every synchronistic event is a key. It's not about superstition or illusion, but about the symbolic language of the soul. If the reunion is destined to happen, it will not come through force or control, but through attunement, awareness, and inner readiness, and the signs will be there all around for those who have eyes to see and hearts to feel. In most profound bonds, especially those that transform us, there is an invisible presence that inhabits the space between two people, the shadow. For Jung, the shadow represents everything we reject in ourselves, everything we don't accept or don't want to see yet still belongs to us. It is formed by repressed impulses, fears, traumas, limiting beliefs, hidden desires, and internal contradictions. When two people meet and connect intensely, their shadows also recognize each other, even unconsciously. That is why the most impactful relationships, especially those ending in painful separations, tend to awaken deep wounds. By touching our unconscious parts, the other forces us to confront what we have repressed. Sometimes this happens through conflicts, jealousy, insecurities, resentments, or disproportionate reactions. But the true root of these feelings usually lies in something older, aspects of our personal history we never faced honestly. The relationship then functions as a mirror, and the reflection is not always easy to accept. When a separation occurs, it is often because the tension between the shadows reached a breaking point. Each returns to their own world carrying grievances, misunderstandings, and the sense that something important was lost. However, from a Jungian perspective, this distance can be a precious opportunity, the moment when we can finally descend to the basement of the soul and face what we have avoided for so long. Facing the shadow is not a comfortable process. It requires courage to admit one's own mistakes, recognize destructive attitudes, understand repetitive patterns, and, above all, embrace the pain projected onto the other. The greatest trap of broken relationships is the tendency to place all responsibility on the other person, without realizing that much of what was lived there stemmed from unresolved inner content. True reunion only happens when that projection is undone and replaced by conscious awareness. When the shadow is integrated, it transforms. What once seemed a threat becomes strength. What once caused pain becomes wisdom. And this internal transmutation has direct effects on the relational field. When someone reconciles with their own shadow, they begin to see the other with more empathy, less rigidity, and greater humanity. It is at this point that a reunion, whether physical or symbolic, becomes possible. Many of the signs that arise during the process of a potential reconnection with someone special are, in fact, invitations to integrate the shadow. Symbolic dreams, recurring memories, situations that mirror old conflicts. All of these are expressions of the unconscious asking for recognition. It's as if the psyche itself is saying, "Are you ready to face what you denied? Are you willing to return different, more whole, more authentic?" Reuniting with someone important, therefore, necessarily involves reuniting with oneself, and that requires traversing the dark territory of the shadow, where our vulnerabilities, emotional dependencies, childhood wounds, and unacknowledged needs reside. But it is precisely in this terrain that the possibility of transformation grows. The shadow is the fertile soil where consciousness can bloom, provided there is willingness to look honestly. When two individuals reunite after a time apart, and both have undergone this shadow integration process, their bond takes on a completely different quality. There are no more blind idealizations or projections that distort reality. Instead, there is presence, respect, and openness to who the other truly is, with light and shadow, strengths and imperfections. This kind of relationship is profoundly healing, offering a true mirror in which each can continue their individuation journey in the other's company. Thus, the shadow is not an obstacle to reunion, but its strongest bridge. Through it, we shed illusions, unhealed wounds, and unconscious repetitions. By confronting it, we not only become more prepared to reunite with someone who left a mark on our soul, but also more prepared to live a real love, one born from the meeting of two whole conscious beings transformed by their own truths. Every profound relationship is, at its core, a movement toward wholeness. For Jung, this wholeness is not something external to be attained, but an internal integration of opposing forces within the psyche. Among these forces are the archetypes of anima and animus, respectively, the feminine principle in a man's unconscious and the masculine principle in a woman's unconscious. Each of us, regardless of gender, carries these internal aspects that directly influence how we relate. The anima is associated with sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, emotional bonding, and the capacity to connect with the symbolic world. The animus, in turn, is linked to action, structured thought, reason, determination, and willpower. When these archetypes remain unconscious, we tend to project them onto the people we fall in love with. A man projects his anima onto a woman, believing she embodies his idealized sensitivity. A woman projects her animus onto a man, seeing in him her own power, strength, or inner direction. Once again, the other becomes a mirror of what we have yet to integrate within ourselves. That is why in deeply symbolic relationships, we feel we have found our other half. This experience, though magical, is actually a psychic summons to develop internally what we see in the other. If someone awakens your sweetness, creativity, or connection with the sacred, it is because your anima is emerging and demanding space in your consciousness. If someone activates your capacity to act, to take a stand, to set boundaries, and to make decisions, it is because your animus is trying to make itself known. However, when this projection remains unconscious, it becomes a source of frustration and imbalance. We begin to expect the other to sustain what is actually our responsibility to develop. We want them always to be sensitive, present, strong, protective, inspirational, when in reality these qualities need to be activated within ourselves. This tension leads to ruptures, since the other was never meant to carry our entire inner world. When a separation occurs, it often indicates that the projective cycle has reached its limit. A reunion, therefore, only becomes possible when both sides recognize that what they once sought in the other can and must be built within themselves. This recognition is a fundamental step in the individuation process. A man who integrates his anima becomes emotionally more complete, more creative, and more empathic. A woman who embraces her animus strengthens her clarity, self-confidence, and capacity for action in the world. By integrating these archetypes, the individual becomes less dependent on the other to feel whole and more capable of loving without projections. In this new stage, a loving reunion gains a different quality. It is no longer about seeking in the other what we lack, but about sharing with the other what we now recognize within ourselves. Love ceases to be a need and becomes a conscious choice. The relationship transforms into a space for mutual growth, where each respects the other's individuality while acknowledging the profound symbolic bond that unites them. Jung affirmed that every true relationship is also an encounter with the self, the psychic totality that resides within us. And it is through the anima and animus that we approach this wholeness. Love, therefore, is not merely an emotion. It is an initiatory path, a way of transformation and self-realization. When a heart readies itself for such a reunion, it no longer seeks to repeat the past, but to live a new possibility, that of a union founded on truth, maturity, and integration. Reuniting with someone who deeply marked our soul is not merely revisiting a story, it is accessing a new level of consciousness. It means recognizing that the other once represented what we needed to awaken within ourselves, and if both have journeyed sincerely and deeply, the reunion can become not only possible but inevitable, not by blind fate, but because love has ceased to be projection and has become an expression of wholeness. A wholeness built within oneself and now shared with the other in a free, conscious, and authentic way. There are connections that neither time nor distance can dissolve. They remain alive in the unconscious, like seeds waiting for the right moment to bloom again. When the reunion happens, it is not the result of luck or chance, but of the internal journey each has undertaken to become whole. In the light of Jungian psychology, we understand that true relationships are mirrors of the soul, and that the signs appearing around us are not mere coincidences, but synchronistic expressions of the self, guiding us back to the essential. The reunion between destined hearts is, above all, the reflection of an inner reconciliation. When we integrate our projections, embrace our shadow, and awaken our anima or animus, we become ready to love consciously. And it is at this stage that the universe conspires in our favor, that the signs multiply, and that the invisible begins to act with clarity. If this message has touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel and continue your journey of self-discovery with us. Watch the video appearing on the screen now. It may be the next step in your process of transformation. And remember, the signs are everywhere. You only need to be awake to see them.